Hi, David.
Good morning.
Excited that we're here for the virtual ISEF session, and I'm going to be doing a little interview, which is fun. We'll see how many of your answers I'm able to guess in advance and what new things I learned about you today.
I
Just
don't
for,
think you've ever interviewed me before.
I don't think so. And honestly, it's been so long since you interviewed me that who knows what we might learn today.
I'm looking forward to it.
So for everyone at home, I'm Katie Knight. I'm Executive Director at Siegel Family Endowment, where David is the chairman. Our mission at SFE is to understand and shape the impact of technology on society, which is super relevant, obviously, to the science and engineering fair and all of the work that you students will be doing now and in the future. David, in addition to being the chairman of our organization, is the co-founder of Two Sigma, which is a financial sciences company, bringing the scientific method to the world of finance and applying data science and cutting edge technology to discover value in the world's data. So I'm excited, David, to have you here and really want to jump right in and have you tell us a little more about yourself beyond the work that you're known for in finance and philanthropy. You started your career sort of as a roboticist, a computer scientist. So I would love to just hear you talk about how you became interested in computer science in the first place.
Oh, well, that was a long time ago. I'm not sure how far back we should go, but I grew up when when computers would fill up a building and you program them with punch cards, key punch machines. And I was very, very fortunate that my my mom and my dad had engineering and scientific backgrounds, and my mom has a PhD in mathematics from the Current Institute at NYU, and they were offering back then. This is in the late 1960s. They were offering back then, a coding class for kids. That was the beginning of the computer era, and everyone thought that computers were going to be the future, and so they started to introduce coding to kids right in the beginning. And NYU had a pioneering program. And then, by the way, it sort of became less common to teach kids to code, shortly after that era. And then, of course, today coding and kids and engineering is STEM-related activities have become, much more, common and relevant. So I was lucky that I was, a kid in the late 1960s, because if I had missed that little window, probably everything would have turned out differently. But anyway, I took this class at NYU using a key punch machine, and I learned to program. And I was probably 9 years old, maybe 10, and it really was unbelievably exciting to me. I think part of it was that I was, actually using a multi-million-dollar machine. That's how much they cost back then, and I enjoyed the ability to put something together and then make the machine, do what I wanted it to do. And it, from that point on, my interest in coding just never went away.
And so eventually you went off to college and ultimately after finishing college decided that you didn't want to leave academia and you went on to get a PhD. So what inspired you to do that?
Well, I've had a lifelong interest in learning, and it has never gone away. I'm naturally very curious. I always wanted to know how something worked. I would take things apart. I actually once, I don't know, I was probably about 5 or 6 years old. I took apart my dad had a reel-to-reel tape deck, and we grew up, modestly, and that was a very expensive thing for the family. And one day I took it apart, and taking it apart turned out to be a lot easier than putting it back together. You open up the cover and then everything pops out. So my dad luckily encouraged curiosity, and he wasn't that unhappy that I had ruined the tape player. But really, my life, I've really wanted to to try to find a way to make learning be, part of everything that I do. And so college, was, a terrific experience. I actually built a robot in college for my senior project, and that was back in, 1983. I graduated from college. Not too many people were building robots back then. The robot that I built, it's very disappointing in a way because the robot that I built is primitive compared to what, middle school and high school kids build today, first robotics. But, this is progress. Princeton really made me, even more excited about computing. And, I had an early childhood interest in artificial intelligence. That's another, we could talk about that. But that led to really a dream come true, which was, the ability to study at the MIT Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. So that was kind of my pathway.
And you were there for a while, no?
Well, people like to joke about it. I was there. It took 8 years to get my PhD, and I probably would have stayed even longer. But my younger sister was graduating from medical school that year, and it was becoming harder and harder to justify why I was still in school, and so I finished. But really, it was one of my favorite times in life. The ability to be with like-minded, really curious, smart people, and 8 years goes by very quickly. If you're really with the right people in the right environment. It didn't feel like 8 years.
Yeah. And working on an interesting problem too, right? I think one of the ISEF finalists, Shreya Ramesh, submitted a question for you that I thought you might actually enjoy answering related to your PhD. How should scientists, and I'll say all sorts of scientists, computer scientists included, identify which problems in society are most worthy of attention? So how do you think about that sort of question?
Wow, that's a wonderful question. In a way, the problem is that there are far too many questions that society needs answered. And it becomes very hard to prioritize what problems are most important. And I don't think it should turn into some kind of popularity contest. I mean, clearly, climate change is an enormous issue, and worthy of study. But now in this COVID crisis, we know that medicine is more important than ever. The science behind medicine. We also know that to move our world forward and to fight poverty, we need to make sure that the benefits of technology and the ability to roll, technologies out to the whole world is very important. In America, we may not worry too much about clean water, for example, but that is not the case throughout the world. We have issues with food supply, sustainable approaches to energy. So there's no shortage of critical problems. So I would actually look at it a little bit differently. I think you end up with the best outcome if you're pursuing something because you're really, really interested in the problem. And rather than try to pick the problem that you think is most important and then try to pursue it. Because for me, if I'm working on something that I really am deeply interested in, I get so much more done. And so I think you should really focus on your curiosity, where you think you really will have the drive and the passion.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think there are also lots of problems to solve in interesting places, right? Which I think is the story of your career in a way. You've sought out problems in new places. So how did you go from 8 years at MIT, you decided that it was time to fly the coop, and you set out into a career in the private sector. So how did you make that transition?
Well, my life has not been overly deliberate. Some people make a big, enormous plan, and they kind of chart out what they want to do and when they want to do it. And I've really taken a much more opportunistic approach. If there's something in front of me that looks really interesting, I pursue that. That's part of the reason why I stayed at MIT that long, because there were an unbelievably large number of interesting things in front of me. And, so when it came to my career, again, I was not really planning it out all that much. I did want to move back to New York because that's where my family lived, and that was important to me. I had considered, for example, going to the West. Back then in '91, when I graduated from MIT, I could have looked for an academic job, but I was a little bit more applied, and so I didn't want to go in that direction. And the West Coast, New York didn't really have. The East Coast had the tech industry, but the real stuff was in California. I didn't want to go that far away, and my family was in New York, and so it was not a deep calculation. And there was an interesting firm that was using computers and data to make investment decisions. And so it seemed like a good problem to me because, data, getting I love getting computers to do human-like things. I mean, that to me is what AI is, that if you can get a computer to do something that normally a human being would only be doing, then in my mind, that's what artificial intelligence is. That people have a lot of different definitions for what the field is. And that's also often why robotics is part of AI, because you're getting a machine to do something that a human might have only been able to do before. And so I looked at the investment management problem as, oh wow, that's kind of interesting. Could you get computers to do a better job than people normally do? It wasn't as if I was deeply attracted to that particular field. I was more attracted to seeing how computers could change the field.
Yeah. And another thing that you talk about a lot that I know you're passionate about is bringing the scientific method to fields and to questions out in the world. So can you talk a little bit about bringing the scientific method out of the lab and into how you solve real world problems?
Well, sure. The scientific method is really should be part of everyone's everyday life. It sounds very fancy, but the scientific method is really a process that is a way to make decisions based upon thoughtful methods using evidence, and you need to support what you're doing based upon evidence and experimentation. You can use the scientific method to guide how you cook. You can use the scientific method to guide how you manage your own education. What are the best ways to learn for yourself? The alternative to the scientific method, to me, is very unappealing. It's pure guesswork, and you want to ignore the information that's being presented to you. Now, I want to add one little caveat here. You're allowed to have emotions. I'm not arguing that everyone should turn into a robotic device devoid of emotions. The scientific method should guide, the scientific and process part of your life. You should use, your emotions to guide the human part of your life.
Yeah, I like that. And I think it's actually a good segue to another question from one of our finalists.
Hi, I'm Shunjan from America, and my question for the panel is, how could science be harnessed to help more people in order to improve their quality of life realistically?
Oh, well, I mean, that we could talk about that for the rest of the day. Ultimately, the only way that we are going to improve the lives of people in need is through science. People throughout the world have benefited, enormously, over the last generation by advances that science has brought to the world. In all fields, in food production. Let's just talk about the internet. The internet which is clearly a scientific development, has really, in my opinion, been responsible for taking more people out of poverty than probably anything else before. People don't necessarily think of the internet as a poverty fighting tool, but I think it really genuinely is. It allowed the world to be connected together in a way to share information, to generate new economic opportunities. Remote parts of the world can now participate in global activities. In the past, it wasn't possible for that to happen. And so, pretty much every scientific advancement has helped to make the human condition improved. I know some people may point to certain bad outcomes from science. I mean, obviously, nuclear weapons is not something we should all be proud of. But on the other hand, the scientific advances that occur over the years, have all been a path to greater prosperity, better health, and the problems that come up along the way can be managed and solved by human creativity.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think related to our work on the philanthropic side, thinking about tech and society and both the positive potential and the potential for harm, can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on tech and how it can be a force for good and what we should be mindful of as we're thinking about all these new advancements that we're making?
Like any kind of advancement, it's not just a straight path to terrific outcome. I think that I just was talking about how the great benefits of the internet, but it is, a lot of people like to use the word a disruptor. It clearly has made enormous changes to the way our lives work, the way business works. Whenever you have a big disruption occurring, there's usually people that greatly benefit, and then there are people that may suffer, and it may be because the technology just changed the rules of the game, and people that were left behind may not get any benefit whatsoever. They may be disadvantaged, and so lately the pace of tech innovation has dramatically increased, similar to Moore's law in a way, the law that governs the power of computers, which has been an exponential growth curve. The advancement of technology, has been gaining speed in our generation, and the amount of disruption that it's causing is, we have to just be realistic. It's been significant, and the people that have harnessed these changes to the fullest have done very, very well. But there are economically and otherwise. But the people that have been less fortunate to be able to manage the disruption have been increasingly left behind. And so for technology to be a force for good, I think all technologists have a responsibility to think about the impact of their inventions and ideas on everyone, not just on the people that benefit from it. And I think we have to reestablish the balance here to make sure that our society is focused on making sure that the benefits, really accrue to everyone, not just to the people that are the lucky ones.
Yeah, I think that's actually talking about disruption and thinking about innovation. A good segue to another question from a finalist.
Hi, I'm Yerim Han from South Korea. My question for the panel is, how do you approach innovation?
And I'd love to hear how you think about that balance between innovation, disruption, your own curiosity, and the impact on the world, and what suggestions you have for students as they're thinking about that.
Well, being innovative is, I think, more of an art than a science in a way. To be innovative, you need to, I think, expose yourself to as much knowledge as possible. You need to make sure that you have time to essentially be creative. You need to actually think outside of the box, which means that you can't be in a box all the time. And so, being innovative is something you can learn. I think that, a lot of people say, oh, these kind of creativity, it's just something you're born with. I don't think so. I think it has more to do with, are you giving yourself the time to let your mind wander? Are you exposing yourself to enough variety of information that you can, think outside of that box? Much innovation occurs when you connect things together that are not normally connected together.
Yep.
And so, for example, in the field of computer science these days, when I was in college, computer science was really just the study of computers and algorithms. Today, computer science is really more morphed into computational biology, computational physics. It's the connection of computing with another field. And so I think in many cases where, when you really look at an innovation, it's almost like it was like two things that you didn't realize, could be connected together, become connected together. But you can only be innovative if you have a broad enough exposure where you would actually even be able to understand how these things might be connected together.
Yeah. So thinking about all these advances, where are you excited to see today's students innovate tomorrow?
Well, going back to what I said earlier, I really think that the students today will be creative in ways that none of us can imagine. Mm-hmm. The advances of the internet, I mean, in a way, it's a very, this is, I think, a kind of a telling story. During my, college and grad school days, that was, the beginning of the internet era. And, when I first, had a computer connected to the internet, there might have been, 200 computers on the internet in total, something like that, not very many. And, as time marched on, during grad school, the number was going up, but it wasn't an enormous number. Very few of us actually imagined, how the whole thing would turn out like today. It was like, we all kind of got the idea that this was very cool and it enabled all kinds of, new ideas and technologies, but it was very hard to, for any of us, I mean, I'm not going to generalize, but, in the crowd I was in, no one imagined that the internet was going to change the world the way it did back in 1985, and so it's very hard to imagine what today's generation will really be inventing and creating, a decade or two out, and I think that maybe that's not even the right way to think about it. I think that that you don't want to constrain the youth today to a particular outcome. It's like, look, they've got a blank canvas, and society has left them with a bunch of different colors of paint and some general ideas, but we don't want to tell them what the painting should look like. So I would prefer to leave it like that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's such a fun cross between science and art conceptually too, which comes back to some of your other points. So coming back just to this question of responsibility as we're thinking about the future, what do you think are some of the exciting opportunities for people to get more involved in creating responsible technology and being a part of solutions instead of just creating more disruptions without answers?
Well, I do think that universities are beginning to recognize that you have to integrate together curriculum in such a way that technologists, that there isn't a complete divide between, for example, people that are interested in technology and people that are interested in public policy. In a way, many schools are organized as, you have the School of Arts and then you have the engineering school. And, a real separation of interest. And it's sort of like, okay, these people think about policy and government issues. These people, are inventing technologies, and, occasionally they'll talk to each other. I think it's perfectly understandable why things evolve that way, but I think now is the time for that to change, and that technologists need to understand that they have to be part of the rest of society, and in fact, everyone needs to be a technologist to some extent, and so you need to really mix it up. There's a movement today to create, an awareness. Some people are calling it public interest technology, where we build this kind of movement where all technologists feel that they should have some responsibility for helping to shape society and not just unleashing the technologies onto society. It reminds me of, I think this is true, that one day Wiener von Braun, the famous rocket scientist, was at a test site, and a rocket was about to be launched, and someone went up to him and said, "Dr. von Braun, where is that rocket going?" And he said, "Not my department. I make it go up." And so, a little funny, but we have to, that is not the way we want to think today.
Yeah. So before we get to our last piece, which is a favorite of ours in any interview where we can get it, we're going to do underrated, overrated. Do you have any parting advice for students?
Well, I think that I do. I think that you should remember that you will be a student your entire life. This is not actually just one, it's not like a light switch. You're a student and then you're not a student. Learning has to be a lifelong obsession. Unfortunately, your education will be obsolete a lot faster than you would want it to be. And I think those people that embrace lifelong learning, will be able to make a much greater contribution to society. And in fact, we have to create a culture in the world of lifelong learning. I think one reason people are being left behind is there's this belief that there are like two phases in your life: the learning phase, and then the, I don't know what the other one is, the working phase. And that used to be the case because the world wasn't changing very quickly. You would, get your learning out of the way, and now you had your skills and whatever you needed to live your whole life. That is not the way it is today. And so my advice is, just remember, you're always going to be a student, and for better or worse, it's for better. So don't worry, your education isn't coming to an end, or should not be coming to an end when you're done with school.
Yeah, I love that. And I would say for everyone out there to find a boss who believes that, because I spend so much of my day reading that it's unbelievable what I learn. So we're going to do a lightning round of underrated, overrated. So I'm going to just give you a few items and you give me your gut reaction, underrated or overrated. You ready? Westworld.
Overrated.
The gig economy.
Overrated.
Autonomous vehicles.
Overrated.
Space tourism.
Come on, overrated.
Virtual reality.
Underrated.
TikTok. Do you know about TikTok?
I do know. I do. I think it's cool.
It.
I'll say it's rated about right.
Plant-based meat substitutes.
Underrated.
Social media overall.
It's really that's too hard a question. It's both overrated and underrated.
The vaccine for COVID-19
is well, we need it badly.
Mm-hmm. And last one, smart cities.
It are underrated.
All right. A lot of overrated, which I think fits. We need more exciting innovation that'll bring us fewer overrated things, more underrated things.
Agreed.
Right.
Agreed.
Thanks, David, for spending some time doing this. I learned some new stuff about you as always, and hopefully we left the students at ISEF with some exciting advice.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your time helping me here.